not even unmuted. All right, say hi again. And that's when I said to the donkey, I don't care if you have a wife at home. We're doing this. What? Oh, hey, everybody. So, all right. Yeah, I know. But so we are now live, as you can tell, and we have nailed.
Not that we're ready to be live.
Nailed this
but
opening.
We are live.
We've nailed this opening. So we're going to talk about a bunch of elections, not just in the U.S., but in the U.K., in Brazil. None of them are really elections. Okay. We're going to talk about a bunch of elections and what's going down and why it's important. If it's important, is it important? It's probably not important, but let's talk about it anyway. So we're going to be covering all that. We're also going to cover some arguably amazing activism. We're going to cover an update on Mumia. We got a lot coming up for you. Another new episode of the Most Censored News will play at the end of this. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. This is our new regular time, 2 p.m. Eastern. That both goes for this, which we call Common Censored with Eleanor Goldfield. Say hello.
Hello.
And it also goes for my other live streams. My other live streams, that was muted. My other live streams for
well, whose fault was that?
Monday and Wednesday, which are all at rumble.com/leaguecamp. All right, let's dig into it. So I titled this, Do Midterms Matter? Because we are getting wall to wall. I mean, I don't actually turn on mainstream media, so I'm not getting wall to wall, but most of America is getting wall to wall coverage of the midterms. And some of you may know our stance on this. Some of you may not. But I think it's a good time to rehash it because some of you may be wondering, why are they not covering the why do I keep doing that? Midterms more.
I don't know, but it's about time that you had an issue saying something. I feel like I have a speech impediment every episode.
Everybody, you should ask her to say railroad workers.
You know what? You can go rail yourself.
You can go work on railing yourself. All right. So I just thought I'd show, one New York Times headline. The damn background. One New York Times headline.
By the way, can someone explain to me why this man looks like an orc?
And I'm sure you're not the first to comment on Fetterman's looks.
Like, it's quite remarkable.
But then again, Dr. Oz looks like a fucking scam doctor, which he is. He looks exactly.
He looks like his eyebrows have been painted on by some out-of-work makeup artist. I mean, they're all terrifying, but.
But it is tough to say. An evil snake oil salesman versus an orc, which do you stand for, is a tough call, I feel like.
And this is why I don't vote.
Okay, so.
In the midterms.
So. I'll give you I'll speak for myself and then you can give your take. My overall take on voting in general and elections, the American elections in general, is that while I believe you should all vote because the fucking corporate ruling elite would love nothing more than for everyone to stop voting because that would be super easy for them to rig these things. While I think everyone should vote and that local issues often do matter, like you can often sway an election, or at least you and a group of people can sway a citywide election or a ballot initiative or something like that. Federally, I find that they have essentially zero impact. And yet the reason it's wall-to-wall coverage is it actually serves the purpose of distracting from the real world out there. And I'll just, quote my favorite study, which I mention all the time, but I know some of you are new to my stuff or our stuff. Large Princeton study a few years ago looked at 1,779 policy initiatives and found that the Americans, if they want something to happen in Congress, in the federal government, presidency, etc., and it does not align with corporate interests, it happens 0% of the time. Meaning, unless you want what corporate America wants, nothing you ever want will happen through Congress. And I want nothing that corporate America wants, so that means nothing I ever want will happen through Congress. All right, that's my tirade.
I rest my case.
And scene.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with everything that you've said, and that Princeton study has come in handy, giving a very concrete and academic reasoning But we also have the lived experiences, right? I mean, how many times have people watching this voted in elections? How many times have you heard the same promises, the same stale promises from candidates, regardless of which party they come from, right? And again, how many times have your lived experiences gotten better? And as Lee pointed out, there might be some small local initiative, like a small locality can vote to go green. A small locality can vote to, to provide free childcare or some shit like that. Like there are things that can be done locally that are important, and so I think it's also very telling that we're not taught about the importance of voting locally. Like when you learn about elections in schools, there's so much import put on the federal elections and the presidents. Oh my God, you have to vote for the president. In reality, that's really the least important because the fucking machine rolls on,
Right.
regardless of who's sitting in the Oval Office and regardless of their ability to finish a sentence. So the way that I feel about elections is basically, there are a couple of different metaphors I use, but I'll use this one. It's like wiping your ass after you take a shit. And yes, the shit is a metaphor for our entire system, but it's like wiping your ass. You do it, but if you're not a toddler, you don't get applause for doing it. So if you wipe your ass after you shit, like just mazel tov, that's great. But I'm not going to shake your hand, but I'm also not going to applaud you for doing it. It's just something that you do as a functioning person, a functioning member of the society. And don't expect you wiping your ass to have a significant effect on the outcome of the day, on the outcome of our future. It's just not going to, but it's a nice thing to do. So the way, and again, I am making a distinction between very important local initiatives and things like that and the large scale, incredibly corrupt system that we live under. So yes, go ahead and vote or don't. I honestly, I don't really care. Just like if you decide that you don't want to wipe your ass and you want to use a bidet, I don't really give it. I don't need to hear about it, and I don't care. To me, the most important thing that happens, and I'm not saying this just like me, I think that evidence has shown this historically. When was the last time something really powerful and significant happened because of voting? Did we vote to get rid of slavery, which, by the way, is still actually legal under the Constitution, under the amendments, the 13th Amendment? Did we vote to provide a 40-hour work week, to get children out of mines? No, these things were made an ultimatum that if you don't do this to the ruling elite, your country will shut down because of strikes, because of marching in the streets, because the system will grind to a halt, because we refuse to be a part of it. And so voting has not shifted our lived experiences historically or more recently in the past. And so vote or don't vote. I don't really give a shit, but I'm certainly not going to spend a lot of my life and a lot of my time caring about who said what and which side said with the blue dumpster fire if you want the red dumpster fire. They're both fucking dumpster fires.
And here's actually one way that voting can be bad, negative, is if you view that as your big event, your big, I'm helping to create change. I'm going to help women or Black people across the nation or whatever, fill in an oppressed group, or I'm going to change this or that by putting in this vote. And you do that, and that's all you talk about, and that is the extent of your effort to change anything in this country, then voting was actually a negative for you as an influence of our society, as a person that is creating even a tiny modicum of change, because you use that as a release valve to actually do nothing. So,
yeah, and I think that is what voting is used for in a lot of ways. And I saw somebody kind of quoted Emma Goldman: if voting did anything, they would make it illegal. And so I think that what our efforts have to happen outside of checking little boxes, particularly because checking a box means very little when they don't even count things properly. Our system is so rigged. So, and even if it weren't rigged, then still you're voting between again, the blue dumpster fire or the red dumpster fire. And I saw somebody said that the dumpster fires are at least contained. That's a very good point. These aren't. Yes, Zach, touche. But yeah, our predominant efforts in terms of the work that we put into the future should not come from voting. So again, wipe your ass or don't wipe your ass, whatever you feel most comfortable with, but it's not going to change much.
And it also, this is why your mainstream media will cover it to no end. This like you, if you're watching this right now, then chances are 95% of you that know what the fuck we normally talk about, that the mainstream media is a pile of garbage, and just a fucking soul sucking shit show of propaganda. So then why, if voting on the federal level were so important and so crucial and could create large scale change, why would this garbage heap of a mainstream media talk about it endlessly? See, they wouldn't.
Because not like they're constantly telling people to go on strike. Right?
Yeah. If the candidates that actually wanted something different than this capitalist eat the world and shit it out the other end, if those candidates were allowed to actually get mainstream media coverage and be competitive and everything, then mainstream media would do everything they could to not cover it, as they did with Bernie Sanders giving what was it, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump 36 times as much coverage or something like that. So, and you don't have to remind me that now Bernie Sanders is also a pile of shit who apparently loves war in Ukraine. But anyway, they will not cover them or mention them or have them on the show. They essentially never had Jill Stein on. There are Green Party candidates running in these midterms. They're never having them on. One candidate that we have supported, Eleanor and I have, is Matthew Ho down in North Carolina, right? He's running on the Green Party ticket, and the Dems did everything they could to ban him from the ballot. You should check him out. But they actually did ban him from the ballot, and then he took them to court, and then the court said that they illegally banned him from the ballot, so he's now on the ballot. But mainstream media is not giving him any coverage. They're not going to mention him. They're not going to let him say anything. And so you have that form of rigging. You have, of course, other forms of rigging, the biggest one being simply money. And people point to the studies that have shown that the person who spends the most money wins over 80% of the time in the House and 90% of the time in the Senate. But here's the thing is the person who spends the first or second largest amount of money wins 100% of the time. So every time in every election, midterm or not, those two people are all the Dems and Republicans. Mm-hmm. So they win 100% of the time. If that's not a fucking rigged lock system, then I don't know what is.
I mean, yes, absolutely. And there was actually an interesting point that was made here by, I'm not even going to try to say this name, Thelonitarian. People are trying to just fuck with me.
The Lonertarian.
Oh, well, why isn't there a space?
You gotta put hyphens in. You can't put spaces in fucking screen names.
There's a space right after the first. Anyway, their point is when
maybe you can put spaces in screen names.
When enough people refuse to vote, we can delegitimize the authority of the federal government officials. Your vote is your consent.
You can highlight it.
I've definitely. I'm sorry, I forgot I could do that. I've definitely heard that argument from folks before, and I think that is a legitimate argument as well, and that it puts the power in abstention, and actually, as Eugene Purrier says, it connects people to their what's the word? Like their power. That's not exactly what he said, but it connects people to their power. And so when people think that their vote is their power, then it completely weakens us, right? Because there is no power in a vote. But if you say that by abstaining, I refuse to be involved with the system, that can be a very powerful move. So I definitely agree with that point as well. And then there was another point. Oh, this is just America. Do you want to tell what's this?
Yeah, we have to, because this is also a FirePo.
See, I'm not
FY Repo.
FY Repo.
We have to read these out loud because we're okay, because we're also a podcast.
Well, right, I was going to. I just wanted you to read the name because I don't do the name reading.
No, I have an ongoing joke. I have the members only live stream every Friday at leecamp.net. And I have an ongoing joke that I have no idea how to say any screen names. I can read everything else fine. Screen names, major issue. Okay, this is not going well on the podcast. I'll tell you that much.
Okay, I'm sorry. So
Eleanor's doing mime routines for a show that is half podcast.
Which is so funny because I'm an audio person, but I just can't help but do the home improvement.
You're still doing it.
I'm sorry.
You're still doing it.
So this person writes, I was so creeped out seeing the commercials during football while I was out eating. Football dudes telling you to vote, then next commercial telling you how cool it is to kill people in Call of Duty. I'd just like to say that's just America. Hashtag America. That is the most American
Make
thing.
sure you get out there and vote. Also, watch me shoot this guy through the skull in Call of Duty. Yeah. Was that the one you wanted to do?
Yes, those were the two that I wanted to address. Thank
cool.
You.
So that both begins and ends our midterm election coverage. Hope you enjoyed it. And here's the thing, if you want to tune in to all the other shows that are acting like this will change everything, this is the biggest election of our lives. And we've gone on and on about, people go, well, what about abortion? And we've done long segments on the abortion decision in the Supreme Court and how the Dems actually had the opportunity throughout these past 40 years at various times to actually codify abortion rights, put them into law, and they haven't fucking done it because they view it more as just a good political football to get people to vote than anything else. Anyway, you get the point. Let's move on actually to a kind of more important election that's not really an election at all. And this is in the UK.
Yes. As they say in the UK, he does not have a mandate, which basically translates he does not have a vote. He was not voted as the prime minister, but he's now the prime minister.
Well, he was voted as the prime minister, but by the tiny elite top of the Conservative Party, which is like a few thousand people, which is something like 0.1% of the British people.
It was, remember back in, was it 2016 or 2017, where the Democrats in court said that they could literally go into a back room, smoke cigars, and pick the candidate?
Yeah.
Well, that's what they did in the UK. And I mean, that's what they do in the US too. It's just that it's a bit more covert.
And apparently they failed in their first backroom pick. Lose trust. Lost the trust quite quick, 44 days, which I believe was the shortest prime ministership ever.
This is now their third prime minister this year, which is, I think, a record. But anyway, so as you might expect, the guy that was chosen by the Conservative Party in the UK is not going to be, I see some people mentioning Corbyn, is not going to be a la Corbyn. He is in fact the richest member of parliament. So that's cool.
The one thing I didn't like about Liz Truss is that she wasn't rich enough for me. That was the thing.
Too poor, right?
Yeah, too poor.
I agree. So first I wanted to share, can we go to yes, that one. So this is actually a cool list that was put out by opendemocracy.net, which has like a few little tidbits that will introduce you to the new Prime Minister of England. So first of all, he like many of the upper crust in the UK went to private school, and not like a private school the way that you might think in the US, where you just, it might still be expensive, but it's not like a boarding school. When we say private school about the UK, we mean like boarding school, and like, you have to wear the special little like the evil twin of Hogwarts type outfits, So he went to one of these boarding schools, and he makes the point that he never expected that he would be prime minister. And this person who wrote a book about, it's called Sad Little Men, Private Schools and the Ruin of England, which is a great title for a book.
Sad Little Men. Oh my God.
And he writes, the idea that while studying in Winchester College, he would have never thought he would be at the top of government is very unlikely to me. leadership qualities are one of the things that they teach you, and you're bound to think of your future in those terms. He also points out that if you repress emotion for yourself, then ultimately it becomes very easy to repress feelings for other people. And this is another thing that you're taught at these boarding schools. And in fact, George Orwell wrote about this as well. He wrote about his time in a boarding school. He was one of the, the poor kids that was allowed to come in to make it look like they weren't elitist. And he writes horrific stories about his time in boarding schools. And so this guy talking about boarding schools here writes, money is at the center of it all because everyone knows it costs a lot of money, including the boys, but the actual money is abstract. The needs of everyday life are simply taken care of for you. So then how can you actually think in terms of people struggling for 5 pounds and 10 pounds? You can't.
Yeah. And they've actually done studies and shown that people who are rich lack empathy. And this could be that they got rich by lacking empathy, or it can also be that they got rich and then the lifestyle of being rich slowly sucked away their empathy. But either way, they've shown literally richer people have less empathy.
So he's also already
There you go.
So last year, he axed a 20 pound a week increase to universal credit that had helped some of the poorest families throughout the pandemic. More than 200,000 people would have been pushed into poverty as a result of the cut. And just at the same time, he requested permission to build a private swimming pool, gym, and tennis court at his manor.
his manor. That's if you have a manor, someone's rich as fuck.
So he's also worked for private hedge funds. He worked for Goldman Sachs. He's worth him and his wife are worth together $830 million or dollars, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't even know what that means.
That's insane. I mean, less than Trump, but still insane.
So this article also points out, I'm not going to get into the weeds here, but it's a very interesting article that you can read about that. He has a lot of financial interests that aren't transparent. Go figure. His wife also comes from a very rich family in India who, by the way, Modi congratulated him on his appointment to prime minister, which I think everyone should be a little concerned if there's someone like Modi congratulating you on your post. And so he has also failed to declare the financial interests of her family, which you are supposed to have to do. But he's just not done that.
What's it matter? Can't they just write across the form rich as fuck?
I know.
No, we're rich as fuck. Just go fuck yourselves. We're rich as fuck.
I'm not on your side.
We own you. What you think?
So he's also linked heavily to right-wing think tanks. And ones that go back to the Thatcher era, which, if you're familiar with that era, did not do good things for the UK, to put it mildly.
For those of you who needed evidence that right-wing think tanks are fucking awful, parasitic, vampiric shitholes, then please see Margaret Thatcher's reign.
But so basically his plan is to up austerity and to basically put poor people out to dry. And
what is austerity a euphemism for again?
Fucking over poor people.
Thank you.
Okay. I was like, wait, we didn't rehearse this ahead of time. I don't know my line.
Not just poor people, but poor and middle class.
Well, I don't oftentimes say middle class because I'm like, I don't know where are they? Like, where is the middle class? Do we have one anymore? Maybe England does.
There is a middle and lower middle class. I mean, I guess if people get poorer, the middle moves.
Just like how Trump redefined what poverty is.
Yeah. So I guess you mean if you define middle class as people just fucking doing awesome, then that's kind of disappeared. But if more people get poor, the middle class just moves with it. So you're still the same number of middle class, I guess.
Do you? Anyway. So basically, there was a recent study released by the Glasgow Centre for Population Health.
That's Glasgow.
Glasgow, earlier in October, and it attributed 335,000 excess deaths to austerity policies imposed by Tory governments between 2012 and 2019. Holy shit. 335,000 excess deaths. That is fucking astonishing.
And for those of you wondering like where those come from, that's from people that don't get food they need. That's from people that don't get the healthcare they need. You know, supposedly Britain still has universal healthcare, but it's been
Not
heavily gutted and torn apart. And so, you know, that's how you get people dying from austerity.
Right. And speaking of NHS, supposedly he wants to fix it, but he has put the man responsible for much of its collapse in charge of the country's economy.
Nice.
And I recently saw another article saying that workers at the NHS hospitals are so poor that they're opening food banks at hospitals now. So yay, Britain.
Jesus Christ.
And these numbers are also astonishing. For the first time ever, the list of people waiting for NHS treatment has reached 7 million. The people waiting in A&E, which is like their emergency room, is the highest level since the record began in 2010. Several hospitals are in danger of physical collapse or have come under increasing strain due to the recent surge in COVID cases. I'm sorry, I'm in a different article.
Oh, no worries.
So what? Wow. So things are worse than they've ever been in the UK in terms of healthcare, and he's just appointed the man who's responsible for much of its downfall in charge of the economy. So I'm sure that'll just go really well.
Well, basically, because that guy had proved he's good at it.
Exactly.
He's good at collapsing a system and enriching the already rich. And that's how you win those positions. That's how you move up the ladder.
And this, I mean, it's like when Obama appointed the head of Citibank for his fucking cabinet.
I think he was Goldman Sachs.
Oh.
But still, Citibank selected most of Obama's cabinet. That's one of the things that came out in the.
I'm conflating. Sorry.
Well, they're both an important point. But that's one of the things WikiLeaks revealed. Yet another reason Julian Assange has been tortured in a prison for 10 years is it revealed that in the first day when Obama was elected, there were emails back and forth between Panetta and others saying, not Panetta, what's his name? Anyway, about from Citibank saying, here's who would be acceptable for each position in your cabinet. And about 2/3 of them are selected. So Citibank told Obama who to put in his cabinet.
Right. And Obama said, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes. I imagine it sounded a lot like this. Yes. Yes, master. I like that.
Is that Igor from Young Frankenstein?
I have no idea where that's from.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's Young Frankenstein.
So those are just a few little tidbits about this new guy. And some people might be watching thinking, why the fuck do I care? I live in the US. And that's fair. But first of all, the US is not in a vacuum as much as we're taught that in school. But also, there was another interesting. So one of the articles I pulled from here was on People's Dispatch, an outlet that you can find over at radindiemedia.com. And they have another.
I'll write it in the comment thread so people can be lazy.
People's Dispatch has another couple of articles about the rise of fascism inside of Europe. And I think all of us sitting in the US can be like, hey, that sounds familiar. Not just historically, but kind of like present day in the US. Isn't there like a rise of fascism? I think we've been seeing that.
I'm not sure. Are you referring to how Baskin Robbins cut it down to 28 flavors instead of 31?
They did not.
I don't know. I made that up.
I was about to say, see if that.
I think, does Baskin Robbins still exist?
Oh my God, it doesn't?
I don't know.
Is it like Blockbuster?
I don't know.
Baskin Robbins used to be my fave.
Oh,
anyway.
You didn't go to the Baskin Robbins Blockbuster joint facility?
No, but if there was one, I would have lived there. That would have been where you could have found me. If I ever ran away from home. So obviously, all joking aside, fascism is on the rise in both the US and Europe. And some of it is of the old flavor, like in the Ukraine, where
Are
it's.
there 31 flavors?
I'm sure there are even more. No, actually, you know what? Not, because they're not really creative, are they? So, and some of it is neo-fascism. Some of it is tied to. I mean, there's a lot. There are myriad examples here, but I think it's important to note what this means, like why this happens. And if you look historically, of course, it's not a mirror image, but we can learn things. And what we see in the rise of fascism historically is what we see in it now, which is neoliberalism. Neoliberalism paves the way for fascism every single fucking time. The austerity measures that the Sunak is already talking about and has already tried to put in place as a member of parliament, these harsh, hawkish perspectives where we're just constantly at war for no fucking reason, and we can't seem to find money for healthcare, we can't seem to find money for education and infrastructure and all of that shit. This leads to a rise in fascism at the particular time when there's obviously an influx of refugees because we keep bombing the shit out of the rest of the world. And so it is this cycle that keeps feeding upon itself and getting deeper and darker and more twisted and more fascistic. And this is what's happening in Europe, in Sweden, my other home country.
Good point about Canada as well.
Yeah. In Sweden, the Swedish Democrats won the last election. They are a legit, and it's not hyperbole here, fascist party in Italy. The new head of the government is part of a party that literally still has members of the Mussolini family in it. I'm not even fucking kidding. I'm very serious. And we see this, of course, in the Ukraine. We see in Hungary. We see in France. The far right is growing and gaining more legitimate power. And in the meantime, there really isn't a real left in a lot of these places, certainly not in the United States, right? Not one that you could actually see coming to power, because that juxtaposition just wouldn't work. So this is concerning, not just for Europe, but also because Europe and the US are very tightly intertwined. And we see what's happening in both places, rising and, well, I should say devolving in parallel, right? Fascism rises in the US, it rises in Europe. More money goes to the wealthiest, more austerity for all of us. We see these parallels, we see these mirror images between the EU and the US. So it should be very concerning what happens in the UK, because this is something that will echo not just in England, but throughout Europe and throughout the United States.
And the UK now is increasingly like a vassal state to the United States that is used to just push our, fascist empire forward. And a good example of that was, yes, it was still Boris Johnson, but I'm sure Poison Sumac would have done the same.
I pointed that out, by the way.
Yeah,
it's my joke.
We had said, I've been saying that we're in a shitty simulation where they've the simulation has run out of actual names that fool people any longer. So you just have ones like Jamie Dimon, which is one letter off from Diamond, runs JP Morgan Chase, and you got Liz Truss, that's very close to Lose Trust, and you got Sumac now as the latest poison at the top of the British system. But anyway, and Fink, of course, the word that literally means detestable person, runs BlackRock, CEO of BlackRock, the largest corporation in the fucking world with trillions of dollars. Anyway, what I was going to say is it was Boris Johnson, but I'm sure Sunak would have done the exact same, who went to Ukraine to sink the peace deal that was about to be signed in April. They basically come to essentially a peace deal. But then all that was left was for Zelensky and Russia, Putin, to basically sign it and go forward with it. And then Boris Johnson, a representative of the United States, went running in there and said, don't sign that because it won't matter for your allies, in the West, which means your puppeteers. And if you sign that, we won't endorse it, meaning we will pull out of helping you in any way, which Ukraine couldn't have that. They're getting billions of dollars from the US, et cetera, et cetera. So, of course, that ended the peace talks. And there were no more peace talks after that, really. And so, the UK becoming more and more fascist is troublesome in that way. They're a representative of the US empire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shall we go to another election?
Sure.
Sorry.
Oh God, it's so many elections.
Do you want to stay on this one?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm done. Fuck that guy. I'm done with it. Move it along.
This one, I actually am taking a side on. This is the election that happens tomorrow in Brazil, and there's already been the first round. This is the runoff, so this is the final election. And Brazil, according to all accounts I've heard, actually has more of a legitimate voting system than the United States has. So I think when people vote there, it actually does matter more than it does in the United States because your vote can actually be counted. And
Bolsonaro already decided that he wasn't going to leave office regardless of what happened.
He did say he was. He did say he was only leaving the office dead or in prison.
I mean, I would love to take him up on either of those, but that's just me.
But Bolsonaro, speaking of fascist, is a straight up fascist. 100%, says indigenous should be murdered, has overseen the aggressive ramp up of deforestation of the Amazon, which many have called the lungs of our planet. And, you can go down the list of just how disgusting and horrific this guy is. But then Lula is not, it's not like I'm going to sit here and say Lula is a fucking hardcore socialist. Lula is far more left-wing than anyone in the United States federal government. But he also, when he was president a couple of terms ago, and he was kind of like, maybe a little left of Bernie Sanders, like a social capitalist or whatever you want to call it. But compared to Bolsonaro, it does seem to be pretty important, even if just on an environmental front. So,
well, which is remember, gosh, God, this seems like so long ago when we were watching the Republican debates and Ted Cruz, or was it Jeb Bush, sounded like he was on point just because he was forming sentences and it was like combating Trump on some point, and we were like, wow, shit has gone really
what
dark.
A genius. Yeah.
If Jeb Bush is the guy that you're on stage and you're looking at, and you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Dude,
I remember on that stage, all of a sudden Jeb Bush, who before the election even began, like years before, people were like, he's gonna win it. He's a lock. And then he was getting obliterated. He wasn't anywhere near winning it. But on that stage, you were like, oh, that's the moderate.
Right.
Like that
good
fucking
God.
psycho was the moderate.
Anyway, yes, that was.
But so this is a pretty big election. I mean, we're not going to spend that much time on it, but this is the runoff. As I said, many people thought Lula might win in the initial one, which he had to get over 50% to win in the initial one. He got like 48%. And it likely, polls show it'll likely be close. The reports I've heard is that although Bolsonaro, who is he's like a Trumpite, he wants to be like Donald Trump, but he's almost, if it's possible, maybe more fascistic than Donald Trump. But the reports I've heard say that even though Bolsonaro says I'm not leaving no matter what, there's no signs that the military would follow him on that. So it seems likely that if Lula were to win this, that he would then become the president of Brazil. The other reason I support Lula is because I'm against bullshit political oppression. And basically, the ruling class of Brazil, along with some help from the ruling class in the United States, made sure Lula got locked up illegitimately during the last election so that he couldn't win because he was in prison. And leaked documents have shown how that trial against him was rigged by the judge, by the prosecutors, and Bolsonaro was, the beneficiary of it. And so there is, even though Lula's not this like let's burn down the ruling class kind of leader, it is him versus the ruling class. The ruling class were the ones that imprisoned him. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that.
I don't have.
You don't have to.
Okay.
I just want to give you space. I didn't want to just assume
I appreciate that.
I keep talking. And
I appreciate that.
okay, so let's see. Oh, we got to go to so the rest of the live stream will be at rumble.com/Lee Camp. I'll show you a new episode of the most censored news.
Got a really good story coming up there, so please do.
Yes, and we have an awesome story. I know most of you just go over there anyway, so I don't think we'll lose many of you, but I should have looked this up a moment ago. I'll give you the link to the live stream over there so you can watch it right now. Because I know you're lazy and you don't want to have to type anything in. But yeah, so that's
I wouldn't go if you didn't send me the link.
That's the link right there. For those of you that are not, that maybe can't see that comment thread, it's rumble.com/Lee Camp, and it's free to watch over there. There's no paywall or anything. Just go and enjoy the show over there. And we've got several more stories, including an update on Mumia Abu Jamal, his trials and tribulations and persecution in prison, and an update on some fucking bizarre yet maybe awesome activism. So we will, for those of you that are getting cut off right now, hope you'll join us over there, and we will see you in a minute. And if you feel like you got like just the bottom third of a nice cup of coffee, like that cold bottom third you don't really finish, you leave sitting on the table. If you feel that we've been worthy of that, then please go join at leecamp.net, because it's $1.25 a week, which is like that bottom third of a nice cup of coffee. I mean, you go to a cafe in the US, the UK, pretty much anywhere, and you get a nice cup of coffee, it's like $4 or $5. So if you think we're just the fucking nasty bottom third that you didn't finish, go over and join up at leecamp.net.
You know, you could just order iced coffee and then you wouldn't. Although then that's like watery, right? Then that's the watery gross bit.
Yeah, the reason I'm not, on summer days I like the idea of iced coffee, but I don't get it because it's like mostly ice, and I'm like,
Well,
I'm
that's if you
not
go to,
buying
like,
ice from you. I'm not gonna pay $5 for ice.
That's like if you go to Starbucks. Don't go to Starbucks. Go to like a cool place where they actually have like, you know, like cold brew or some shit where it's already cold.
Not just a cold brew, but when they have the fucking coffee ice cubes, so it melts and then it's still not diluted, dude.
Or
whoever
you
thought
can
of
do it at
that
home.
Deserves a Nobel fucking prize. Because that's genius.
The Nobel Prize doesn't mean anything anymore.
All right, deserves a Lee Camp fucking prize for best coffee idea.
Although, you know what you do is you make ice cubes out of the milk.
Yeah, who uses milk?
Oh, I've seen you with your fucking Oatly. Don't even pretend.
I rarely. It's like a celebratory, like fucking, oh, it's Rosh Hashanah, I'm going to use some Oatly kind of situation. I don't celebrate Rosh Hashanah, but.
Okay, yes, yeah, first of all, you do. And second of all.
Wait, I did? Did I this year?
We did. We had a little atoning of sins type situation.
Did we?
Yes, I did. You should atone for yours. God damn it.
Was there a second Lee?
No.
And was it second comma Lee, or was it? All right.
Is that confusing for you?
See you at rumble.com/Lee Camp, everybody.
When someone says firstly, do you think they're talking to you even if they're not?
Yeah, it's like talking down, like first Lee, which is pretty harsh, you know. I don't want to hear that.
It's gotta be rough for you.